In the last video, we wrote our first little Node.js server. Now this server is not doing all it should do. It's not returning a response, for example, but it's generally showing how we do create server cycle with Node.js and how do we create our own servers. Now let's understand what happened there. We executed that file with the Node app.js because our file was named app.js, and this essentially started the script where Node.js went through the entire file, parsed the code, registered the variable and functions, and so on. So it is basically read our entire code and started executing it, but then something important happened. We never left that program, right? The reason for this is an important concept in Node.js called the event loop. This is basically a loop process which is managed by Node.js, which keeps on running as long as there is a work to do. You could say it keeps on running as long as there are event listeners registered, and one event listener we did register and we never unregister is that incoming request listener we passed or we set up with the help or create server. So we passed a functions to create server, and that is basically an ongoing event listener, one we did not unregister from. We shouldn't, because our server should of course stay up and running. So our core node application basically is managed by this event loop. All our code is managed by this, and as I mentioned, Node.js uses such an event-driven approach for all kinds of stuff, not just for managing that server, but that is of course a crucial part. And Node.js actually executes a single-threaded JavaScript, so the entire node process basically uses one thread on our computer it's running on. Now as you might guess, if we create a server with Node.js, it should of course be able to handle multiple thousands, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of incoming requests. And if it will always pause and do something with that request, that will not be that great. Hence it uses this event loop concept where in the end it always keeps on running and just executes code when a certain event occurs, so that in general it's always available. Why this might still sound like okay, but if we got two incoming requests, it needs to handle two events where it's super fast and handling this request. And actually behind the scenes, it does some multi-threading by leveraging the operating system. But this event loop is a core thing you have to keep in mind, that Node.js basically has an ongoing loop as long as there is a listeners, and create server create a listener which never stops. But if you eventually were to unregister, and you can do this process.exit, it will end, and you can see that too if you go back to our code. And after this line, we type process or exit and execute this function, and we clear our console. And now we repeat node app.js. You see, it's now still running because this function never executed. We have no incoming request yet. But if we now reload to localhost 3000, you see we still log that request, but we are back at the new line in the terminal because now it did quit that process. It didn't before, but now it did. It did quit that process with the help of process.exit. Now typically you don't code that in your code, because you don't want to quit your server. If it is quit, people will not able to reach your web page anymore. But this is important for understanding how this works. Process.exit basically hard exit our event loop, and therefore the program shuts down because there was no more work to do. Node.js saw that there is no more work to do, and basically it's close the program and give control back to our terminal here. This is how we execute such a Node.js file and how we generally create such a server, what Node.js does behind the scenes.